All right, so today is April 28, 2021. This is the meeting of the Container Storage Interface community. Let's go ahead and jump into it. So we have a few items on the agenda. We're just going to go through them one by one. If you have anything else you want to discuss, please feel free to add it to the bottom of the agenda. A link to the agenda is in the calendar invite. First item, Ben, review force detach proposal.
Yeah. All right. So some of you may remember that back in September, I sort of made a high-level proposal for this feature, but I didn't supply a PR at that time. So I went ahead and filled out the specific proposal with two new capabilities, one controller capability, one node capability, some new fields on methods. But it's the proposal is basically the same that it was back in September. The goal here is to be able to, in under circumstances when a node is sort of unreachable and unmanageable by the CO, to be able to force disconnect that node from a volume so that the volume may be safely connected to another node. Um, just to minimize downtime of whatever application was consuming that volume. And then also provide the facilities to clean up after doing that, because the big downside to just force detaching a volume from a node is that if you later start attaching other volumes to that node without doing any kind of cleanup, you can create certain problems. So having thought through all the possible eventualities, I think this proposal does everything we need it to do. So let me open up the PR myself. Open link. Yeah, so if you want to go to the part where I modify the state transition diagrams, no, up there. So this illustrates why it's a little bit more complicated than just having some more fields on some methods, because the state machine actually changes. Oh, split screen, clever. I don't know. Would you rather have me share, Saad? Would that make it easier for you to take notes? Actually, I don't even know how to get a split screen when I do this. Just have a trick in GitHub. And Saad, you might be on mute because I can't hear you. But yeah, the interesting change is the state diagram where, typically you have to go from created to node ready to volume ready to published, and then backwards. That's how the state diagram was originally proposed in CSI. And the big change that this change proposes is that from published, you can directly call controller unpublished volume before calling node unpublished, before calling node unstage, because of course the node is not reachable under these circumstances. And then that puts this volume node pair into this weird quarantined state where now, if the CSI plugin has the appropriate capabilities and it succeeds the call to controller unpublished volume, a CO can be confident that that node definitely can't access that volume and that it is safe to controller publish that volume to a different node. But you're in this state where you have to also still node unpublish and node unstage the volume after controller unpublish has succeeded, in order to get back to a ground state with that particular volume so that you could publish it back to that node. Does that make sense? Like I realized that I probably need like a higher level outline of what's being done here in the CSI spec, like some paragraph that just explains the use case and why. Because I was focusing on the very specific changes, the new capabilities, the new fields, and the new states in the state machine.
So this would be part of the like a non-graceful no shutdown proposal, right? So this will be
Right.
can be used with that. I think so. I look at the two capabilities that you're adding. I think the controller side, that one makes sense. The node side, in theory, it makes sense, but I'm looking at the existing implementation in Kubernetes right now. I don't think that is needed based on my experiment.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
so let me walk through the very specific case that I have in mind, because I think this is illustrative. So imagine an iSCSI based volume. You know, there's many other situations where this could occur, but I think lots of us understand iSCSI. So if you have an iSCSI volume attached to a node, you know, you do the controller publish, which would basically set up the LUN on the storage device in such a way that the IQN of that node has access to log into the target and see the volume. So there's something controller publish does to basically ensure that a particular node can log into the iSCSI target and see that LUN. And then when you do the node stage and node publish, somehow the iSCSI initiator logs in, sees the volume, mounts it, formats it, and hands it off to a pod, and away you go. Now, if that node goes out to lunch for whatever reason, you know, some services get killed on the node, the NIC, you know, has problems, there's a network switch error, you know, all the various reasons that you can't talk to that node. You know, you had some controller on the CO side might conclude that the pod is probably dead, and that in order to ensure that it comes up quickly, we need to force detach that volume from that node and attach it to a different node and bring it up there, and then wait and see if this node ever comes back, you know, maybe after an administrator does something, or maybe after the transient error fails. The problem is, so what a controller unpublished volume with the fence flag would need to do this safely is it would need to ensure that iSCSI initiator on that node definitely couldn't perform IO on that LUN anymore, so that when another node started accessing it, they would know they would be the only user of that LUN, and there wouldn't be any data corruption coming from a different node. The problem is, if you never bother with the node unstage, node unpublish on that other node when it comes back, it still believes it's logged in. It still has a SCSI device. It still has write buffers in the kernel waiting to write data to the LUN. And if you just go ahead and allow the volume to get, or allow a pod to get rescheduled to that node using the same volume, and you go ahead and just call node stage, node publish, the node will be in a state such that it already thinks that it has that volume, and it already has all of the state set up, and it could have data that it wants to write, which
So,
would corrupt the volume if you allowed that to happen.
Ben, so if node unpublished is called and successful, then we should be all set, right?
Well, node unpublished and optionally node unstage if that.
So yeah, okay. So what I'm
It.
saying is there's some code already there. What I see is after the node is shut down, you know, as long as the volume attachment are deleted, when this node comes up again, there's actually already, like in the kubelet volume manager, there's already logic that goes to cleanups. So it's going to call controller unpublished already. So I don't know if you still need this additional flag that you're proposing to tell the CSI driver.
There's two problems. So one is, normally when you call node unpublished and node unstage, controller unpublished hasn't been called yet. So it's reasonable for the node to expect.
So this is already called in this case. I mean, because I made some changes in the code.
No, the controller unpublished has already been called in this specific case. So normally what happens is you always call node unpublished and node unstage before controller unpublished, meaning that the node can reasonably expect to like flush its last dirty buffers and when it unmounts the file system, and it can cleanly log out, and it expects to, you know, do a clean shutdown of what's there so that you don't have any data loss when you kill a pod, right? It wants to make sure that all the IO from the pod got written. So typically, if you encounter any errors in node unpublished or node unstage, you fail and expect the retry. That's the normal path. Is if doing the node unpublished would result in data loss, you just fail and say try again, and hope someone eventually figures out how to clean up, you know, how to fix the problem. If you call node unpublished and node unstage after node controller unpublished has already succeeded, you will definitely get errors. Like, you will have dirty buffers that can't be flushed. You will have iSCSI connections that can't talk to the server. Like you will have to do like unmount -F to force the unmount. You'll have to do more aggressive things to clean up the iSCSI session.
Okay.
And so, but most importantly, you want that signal from the CO to the SP saying, I know that this is an unclean connection. I know that you're going to lose data when you do this, and I'm okay with that. Therefore, be aggressive about your cleanup and prefer to succeed rather than prefer to avoid data loss, right? Because under normal circumstances, you avoid data loss. But under this circumstance, you really want to prefer success. And then there's one other reason why this is important, which is we're going to have some kind of tracking on the CO side after this has happened, where the node, like after you've performed one of these controller unpublished with a fence flag, you're going to have to mark the node as like in quarantine or dirty or some sort of flag.
So that I assume is already happened like before the step, before the node is up again. So
right. But it's crucial that you do not remove that taint or whatever it is.
No, we don't.
Until
We keep that taint.
Until you've confirmed that all the volumes have been unpublished and all the volumes have been unstaged. Only then do you remove the taint and say, okay, now the node is clean and it's okay to rejoin the cluster and begin receiving new workloads. And I don't know if we have that today, but
no, it's not. I'm just saying that I was basically doing some experiment. I'm just
okay.
I think that makes sense. Yeah. So I see that then that makes sense to have that. So have this flag for the node unpublished, but the node on stage will not be called at that time, because at that time we don't have enough information to do reconstruction. So I checked with Jing. I don't know if Jing's on the call. So but we do. So in my testing, I see that there are some global bound directory that are left over, so that we can manually clean up, but we cannot call node on stage. But it should be fine if calling node unpublished. Yeah.
I think like not supporting reconstruction for staged volumes, I think is sort of an oversight that we have in Kubernetes today. I don't think that's intentional.
But I talked to Jean. Jean says it's not. She said it's not possible to do that at this time. That's what she told me. So she said we don't have enough information to do that. That's what she said.
I think that's true for in-tree volumes, but I think for CSI volumes, that's not true. I think for CSI volumes, we can.
Okay.
So I think this should be something we should consider implementing as part of this whole proposal.
Okay. All right. I thought she because I thought she is very familiar with this code path. She said that's not possible. So okay, I'll take maybe I'll talk to her again and look at this part.
I think from a CSI spec perspective, we have to unwind the entire stack of operations that have been done before we can say
I thought at that time we don't have the information, but okay, so let's just need to revisit that part.
Okay.
Because I thought she knows the code very well. So
and I'm very interested in helping with the Kubernetes side changes that would go along with something like this, but I wanted to start with the CSI level changes and make sure that we kind of agree that this is the rational way to deal with nodes that you can't reach.
Haman, do you have some comment here? Do you know this part?
No, I was saying that two things. One was that we should clarify in the the use cases that this is supposed to be used for cleanup of volumes, like when the node comes back, like the force flag in the node unpublished. And if we are going to provide it here, and assuming we fix the reconstruction part in kubelet, like don't we need one in stage as well? No, sorry, node on stage.
Node on, yeah, that's the node on stage, right? We're talking about it. So right now, node unpublished, that's already called.
But the force flag that Ben added in his PR.
So that we need to add that to when we call node unpublished, we need to add that flag. So right now, nothing is checked, but we will actually go ahead and call it anyway.
No. I'm saying that do we need this flag in node unstage also?
Yeah. So if we are going to fix this, right? Because right now, I thought there was no way to call that. That's what after I talked to Jing, I thought that's not possible. But now Michelle says it's actually possible for CSI drivers, so we need to take another look into that part. And then if we do that, of course, we should also add this flag there as well, right? Makes sense. Okay.
So I
So I
don't think
think
that I don't think the PR is ready to merge today, but I wanted to sort of present it to everyone so you understand what this is about. I'd like to get reviews on the PR, specific comments. I will add like a top level paragraph that just sort of talks about the whole use case, you know, from beginning to end and explains why these flags are there. I didn't want to pollute, you know, the specific field documentation too much with all the detail. And just wanted to be precise. But yeah, we need like a high level, this is why this is here, this is how you should use it statement somewhere in the spec.
I think it's the node side capability. Those are the ones that are used when the nodes are coming up when we do cleanup. The other flag in the controller, that capability, I think that we used basically when the node goes down. You know, when the GC controller gets triggered to clean up pods, that's the time that we are checking those.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
actually, it's actually when the detach controller gets involved trying to clean up the volume attachments. That's the time that we're checking that flag, I think. So yeah, so there are those two flags, those two capabilities are checked at the different places.
I think we might have to do a POC actually for this.
Yeah. So I've already done like part of the POC, and I don't have all of these capabilities, but I have already done a POC, which tested whatever that is mentioned in the CAP, like the changes in the GC, the GC controller, detach controller. I already done that part, and also the node cleanup part. So I already done that part. But I need to try that with the latest code because there's I don't know if there's any with this the graceful shutdown thing, but I don't think that had impact because I don't think they consider the volume attachment cleanup at all.
I meant with this CSI spec changes that.
Okay, yeah, okay. So we should try this one. Yeah, together with because this one, I think the controller side is straightforward, but I think the node side cleanup, we probably need to test that with. Do we need to test that with the SCSI backend? iSCSI
we need to
backend
make sure this
because
works with all kinds of scenarios. But
but I'm saying when I'm testing with our driver, it was successful. Right? I didn't run. That's why I didn't run into this part. That's why I thought we don't need this node side capability because I didn't use iSCSI. So maybe so yeah, so I think we can have this. What I'm saying is if I'm trying this on my side, it's not going to show, it's going to fail because it didn't fail for me.
Yeah, okay. Well, and the problem is not that it necessarily fails, but just that you have garbage left over that could corrupt your volume. And so this is an opportunity to clean up garbage. Some drivers might have a no-op. They might ignore the force flag and say, you know what, I'm going to do the same thing I normally do. It doesn't matter. But this is an opportunity to be more aggressive about cleaning up and flushing buffers and everything. So I'm mindful of the time because I know there's a bunch of stuff on the agenda. Are there any other comments at a high level, or are people okay just reviewing the PR and moving on?
I think we'll leave in the PR. I think that might be the best place. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Ben. So I think we can move on to the next item, Jiawei node ID length extending to 256 bytes. Jiawei, you want to talk about this?
Yeah, sure. So for some background of this, the CSI node ID length used to be 128 characters. And then in a previous version of container storage interface release, we extend the length limitation to 192. So basically, I'm proposing to extend this again to 256 bytes because it seems like 192 is still not enough for some of the driver ID, for some of the node ID. Sorry.
What
Yeah.
makes us think 256 is enough if 192 wasn't? Maybe we should make it huge.
That's a good question, but I think 256 it's probably like more suitable. So yeah. I
My
don't
only
think
Someone
comment
saying
is
there's a limit. I don't know. Someone is that Armando. Someone said there's some limitations. Can't be too big. I forgot.
I think that
System
was
D had
the
some limit.
yeah, that was the mount path limit. This is
Okay.
node ID limit.
Oh, okay.
So I think mount path is still 192.
Or I'm just curious for COs that have really, really long node IDs, can they just like hash the node IDs when using this instead as like a workaround? To something that's like 256 bytes or characters.
I think that would make just usability really difficult because then your node ID is just cryptic.
I mean, yeah. I understand that. I was just thinking like from, I guess at the time that a call is made to a CSI driver, but yeah, that makes sense. Actually, maybe scratch that.
Yeah, and I think we verified the code path. This node ID is only used in the CSI node field. It's not even used in like the name of any objects. So in terms of like, I don't see any like system restrictions that we would hit in terms of increasing the length.
I think the big question is how much is enough, right? If we already extended it once and it wasn't enough, we don't want to keep doing this every few months.
Yeah, I think on the GCE side, they did some calculation and figured out 256 is enough. The question is if anybody else needs anything more than that. It sounds like, Jiawei, you've been talking to other folks who've also wanted to extend it. Is 256 enough for the cases that you've been talking to?
Yeah, definitely. So I think from a GKE point of view, 2.256 is definitely a safe length. But like if anybody else know like other limitations from other node ID, please let us know. So this is very important because this is important for the CSI migration in Kubernetes. So once CSI migration is enabled, there will be a lot of CSI node ID generated. So if for any reason the ID length extends the limitation, the CSI node will not be created, and then the CSI migration will be broken. So if anyone else thinks 256 is not enough, please raise the concern. Otherwise, I think 256 might be good enough.
Okay, any other comments, concerns, questions on this one? Okay, sounds good. So I guess we'll start with 256 again. As far as we know, that's good enough. And if needed, we can bump it again in the future. It's always easy to relax a restriction. It is always difficult to tighten it. So I think I'm fine with 256. Moving on to the next item, Chris, new single node, single multi-writer access mode. Do you want to share your screen or? I can share it otherwise, no big deal.
Okay. Yeah, that's okay then. So currently in the CSI spec, just for some background, we have a single node writer access mode. And by definition, this access mode means that it can only be published once as read-write on a single node at any given time. But this definition doesn't include any mention of the number of writers. So it could be assumed to be multiple writers. The problem is how this access mode is used during the node publish volume RPC. So during node publish volume in the spec markdown, we have a table that outlines the expected behavior when this RPC is called more than once for the same volume on the same node. This table outlines that when it's called a second time for a volume with a non-multi-node access mode and a different target path, the plugin should return failed precondition. But the problem is for CSI plugins that strictly adhere to this spec, single node writer volumes can only be mounted to a single target path because single node writer is a non-multi-node access mode. So this behavior of single node writer means single node single writer, and it conflicts with the original definition. So because of this, the CSI spec then no longer has an access mode that represents multiple writers on the same node. So for backwards compatibility, we can't really change the existing behavior of single node writer, nor how it interacts with node publish volume. So the proposed solution here is to introduce two new access modes that disambiguate the number of writers on a node. And they're called single node single writer and single node multi-writer. These access modes are modeled after the existing multi-node single writer or multi-node multi-writer access modes. Introducing these access modes, though, requires expanding the capabilities of the CSI driver. This way, a client can determine which access mode to use if they plan on using a single node. So this needs to be present in both the controller service and node service, since both of these services have RPCs that take volume capabilities that includes the access mode. So I think the plan is if a CSI driver supports this capability, then a client should either use single node single writer or single node multi-writer, depending on their use case. And if a CSI driver does not support this capability, then the client should continue to use the single node writer if that's their intention. And we would not need to expand these capabilities, I guess, as an alternative solution if we had a way of exposing supported access modes to the user. But from my understanding, the way that we do this is through these capabilities. So that's why these capability bits exist. The PR is probably still needs a little bit of work. I need to mark those enum values as alpha, and I probably need to also add the single node writer expected behavior to the table, because I have a little table in the spec markdown that says like, note if the CSI driver supports this capability, this is what the behavior, expected behavior should look like, and I should probably include single node writer in there just for consistency. And so, yeah, that's it. If anyone has any questions about this.
Did I capture this summary correctly here? So if the CSI driver supports this, client should use single node single writer or single node multi-writer, otherwise use the old single node writer or single node writer. Okay,
Yep.
I just want to say I support this proposal strongly. This has been an issue we've had for a long time, and we knew the fix was going to be complicated, but I think this is the right fix. So +1, plus 100, plus.
Are we going to change? We cannot change the meaning of any of the existing access modes. So single node writer, single node, single writer. It sounds same, but
Yeah, the problem there is backwards compatibility. If you get a CO that's trying to use the new interpretation of those values and an SP that understands the old interpretation, you get bad results. So this way you definitely know that you're talking to someone who understands the new values.
do you want to deprecate one or the other, like maybe single node writer, or like at some point? It seems like
Yeah.
Well,
I think
The
given that
problem is an SP might not have the capability, and so you have to continue supporting the old way if you deal with an old SP.
yeah, but
Forever.
I mean, I think the intention is that this single node, single writer and single node multi-writer is supposed to replace single node writer. So I feel like we can deprecate single node writer, but we can't actually remove it until like a 2.0.
Right, as long as we're dealing with old CSI plugins that don't have the capability, you have to keep using the old access mode.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe marking it
Isn't the
deprecated
all access
helps.
mode? Isn't the all access mode exactly the same as the use single node, single writer?
The problem with the old access mode is what it says in the spec and what people tend to implement in the code doesn't match. So if someone strictly followed the spec, they would get one behavior, but most people decided not to strictly follow the spec because they wanted the other behavior. And therefore, you get this weird conflict.
But then there is really not a conflict. It's about implementation.
Well, no,
If the spec clearly states that a behavior, which is single node, single writer, and drivers do something else, then I'm in favor of adding the single node multi-writer. But I think the other node is basically the one, the other option is the one that we currently have already in the spec.
I think the problem is that because there was no way to get single node multi-writer, and because Kubernetes interprets the existing single node writer as single node multi-writer, people went ahead and wrote their CSI plugins to behave as if it was single node multi-writer. And so they're just violating the spec. And now if anybody really wanted to get the single node, single writer semantics, you probably couldn't get it reliably because too many CSI plugins violate the spec. And this gives you a way to definitely get that semantic if you want it.
I think the Kubernetes violates spec here, like outright actually.
On the Kubernetes side as well, I know this is the CSI spec meeting, but there is a cap open for the cluster orchestrator side changes as well to add an access mode that will end up using this.
Yeah, we've talked about how to do this in a backwards compatible way, and it's just no clean way. So this proposal of adding 2 new options is sort of the least evil approach to cleaning up the mess.
Something that I'm particularly curious and would like feedback on is how to best present this in the spec markdown. So any suggestions on that, on trying to communicate the legacy and new expected behavior in those tables?
Yeah, I think you just need to add new rows to the node published volume part of the spec that has the table that has triggered all of these problems from the beginning. Just make it very clear what the 2 new values mean in that table.
Okay.
And
I added it as a separate table, but yeah, I could extend the existing table.
well, yeah, I didn't actually look at that part of your change, but
Okay.
as long as someone reading
Yeah.
the node published volume understands it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
think just adding a comment somewhere kind of indicating that like these two new ones are intended to replace single node writer, assuming the plugin, you know, advertises that capability.
And then the question is, if we are going to deprecate single node writer, do we want to do it as part of this change or as a follow-on change after this change merges?
Maybe we, when like this goes out of alpha, that
Okay,
would be
yeah,
a
because
good
it has to
time.
go through an alpha beta thing. Okay.
All right, good stuff. I'm glad we're getting this cleaned up finally. All right, remember doing the wrong thing here on purpose on the Kubernetes side and regretting it, so I'm glad we're cleaning it up. All right, let's move on. If there's nothing else on this item, Hemant, you have 468.
Yeah, so I think the most of the proposal is sort of in agreement, like where James had some comment was like, if you see his last comment, I need to think through the error cases. So he's concerned about the complexity, and the complexity he's referring to is, if you see the error handling in the spec change, then there's two error cases. So if volume is staged with the, so do you want to mute the
Oh, sorry.
keyboard? Sorry. Yeah. The there are two error cases. One is that if volume stays with different volume was staged with mount group X, and then volume is being published with mount group Y, and the driver doesn't support it, then we are saying, okay, this is an error and failed precondition. There's a one row for that, and there's a second row. Maybe the driver doesn't implement volume stage at all, and volume is being published with different like mount groups, and the driver did not support node publish with different mount groups. So there's another row for like that one, so we return a failed precondition. So I was thinking like what we could do to like make the spec more what to say, like at least to begin with less flexible and more strict, and so that the error handling can be squashed. And what I was thinking is like we could outright say that node stage and node publish must use the same volume mount group, as well as all instances of volume mount group for the same volume on the same node, like the single node multi-write use case that Chris was proposing. They all have to use the same volume mount group. So it would allow us to like squash these two error cases into one, like like volume stage with different mount group, volume published with different mount group. We can just write it in one row that volume staged or published with different mount group, volume already staged or published with different mount group, and then more the details can be found in the message. And it will be sort of strict. It will rule out some use cases where, like for example, in Azure file, the driver that we are trying to support, it does support mounting the same volume multiple times on same node with different FS groups. It does support it, but actually Azure file, since they have implemented staging, so it's technically possible, but the CSI driver doesn't support it. So like the underlying storage provider supports it, but the CSI driver implementation choose not to support this. So it will work. It will solve. It will still meet our this restricted definition of volume mount group will still meet the use case that we are trying to solve, and it will be much more restrict than that what we have. I don't know if that will. That's why I pinged James offline actually if he wanted to come to this meeting, but that will restrict the flexibility that we had in the spec, and it could clean up the error handling. But I don't know if that's enough or what everybody else thinks. I have left a comment if you see the last comment there. That's the one.
I think it's reasonable. I don't have strong feelings though.
Yeah, I think if we in future, if we do want to support volumes to use different FS group, like sorry, volume mount group, then we can expand it and make it more flexible because it's easier. But yeah, we can start with a more restricted approach and then. All right then. So this.
Sorry, my dumb question about this one is just how do we do this across operating systems? So if you have like Windows or something, what does volume mount group mean? Does it still apply?
Yeah, it does apply actually. In Windows it's called some like the Windows has the concept of groups as well when you mount it. So it could be administrator, or it could be something else. So it's a string right now. So the string could be like in Unix case, it could be a number like 1000, the GID. And in case of Windows, it could be a string like administrator or something else. So yeah.
Okay, so does anybody else have any other questions, comments, concerns about volume mount groups? Okay, sounds like the conclusion here is starting more restrictive is okay.
Yeah, so I will update the PR to restrict the use but we still have to check. We have to still check with James and get it approved.
Cool, sounds good to me. And anything else on this one? If not, we can move to the last item. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the last one from Jonathan.
All right, yeah. So I'll give just a brief bit of background on this. So the reason for this PR and issue is that in the spec, the node unpublished volume request states that the SP must delete the file or directory it created at the target path. And right now, as far as I can tell, the existing CSI drivers don't do that. They rely on the kubelet to remove that path in the teardown path. So this PR adds in a sanity test to verify that the driver is removing the target path as part of node unpublished. And the way, so I just filed this today, and Patrick already gave some good feedback on this because I was uncertain about a couple of things. So the way I implemented this first implementation is to rely on the error code of node get volume stats. The assumption being that if the volume has been unpublished and the path was removed, that we would get not found back. And that's true, at least in the drivers that I looked at, but I think that's not guaranteed by the spec. And so my concern was exactly what Patrick commented on the PR a few minutes ago, which is that we could get some false positives back with the way this is written today. So, but the reason I went with this approach is I and I apologize if this is a newbie newbie concern, but I thought we could not assume that the test ran on the same node as the driver it's testing. But based on Patrick's comments, it looks like we probably can, and I can just check the existence of the directory.
No, your concern is right. The test does not necessarily run on the same node, but there are mechanisms to at least create directories on a remote node or somewhere else, and it's very configurable, supporting both Go callbacks and configurable commands, basically an SSH command that logs into the node. But there is no such thing for a check that a directory exists. So that is the thing that you would need to add. And then someone running the CSI sanity test suite would need to configure that additional feature. Otherwise, the test can't run. But I think that is the right approach. We can't rely on node check volume or the volume list thing that you were using. It's just not precise enough.
Okay.
Do we not have something in the CSI spec saying that node calls have to come from the same node?
We do that with proxying. If people set up something like port forwarding, and we do that with SOCAT in our CSI driver host path testing, then the CSI test or the sanity test can run elsewhere, and it talks to the node call via the normal Unix domain socket. It just isn't on the same machine.
I thought in other places in CSI test, we do things like create directories.
Yes,
like
that's
for the node publish test,
yes,
we create the directory.
And that is done through a mechanism that also can be configured to work if the machine under test is not the local machine. There is a possibility to plug in, say, an SSH command that calls mkdir.
Okay, so it sounds like there is precedence for how this is done, and just need to update it to follow that precedence.
Yep, yeah, I'll dig into this. Thank you again for the feedback. Appreciate it, Patrick.
Thank you both. All right, anything else on this item? All right, any other items to discuss while we're here? We've got 9 minutes left. All right, we can end a little bit early today then. Thank you, everyone, and we will reconvene in 1 month. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.